John Paul II taught that man is the way. In his first encyclical, Redemptor Hominis number 13, John Paul II states, quote, Jesus Christ is the chief way for the church. John Paul II begins by stating that Jesus Christ is the chief way for the church. This is quite true, for our Lord said, I am the way and the truth and the life, John 14:6. In Redemptor Hominis number 14, however, John Paul II states, quote, for the church always lead to man. This man is the primary route that the church must travel in fulfilling her mission. He is the primary and fundamental way for the church, the way traced out by Christ himself. By stating that Jesus Christ is the chief way for the church, Redemptor Hominis number 13, and that man is the primary and fundamental way for the church, Redemptor Hominis number 14, John Paul II is equating man with Jesus Christ. And as we have proven, for John Paul II, man and Christ have an identical meaning. Man is the way for the church precisely by reason of the fact that the church follows Christ. Here, John Paul II admits that man is the way for the church precisely because the church follows Christ, who is the way. Thus, he admits that man and Christ are one and the same to him. Thus, it happens whenever man becomes the way of the church, and the church, the people of God, knows no other way than Jesus Christ. These words clearly indicate that the way of man and the way of Jesus Christ are identical. John Paul II, Redemptor Hominis number 21, quote, man is and always becomes the way for the church's daily life. Jesus Christ told us, I am the way and the truth and the life. What's fascinating about this paragraph in particular is that John Paul II even puts the word way in quotation marks, indicating that he is making reference to John 14:6, where this term is divinely defined. In other words, man is the way of John 14:6 to him. John Paul II, Redemptor Hominis number 19, quote, we must constantly aim at him who is both the way and the truth, John 14:6. John Paul II, Redemptor Hominis number 22, quote, for in this the church also recognizes the way for her daily life, which is each person. The way for the church's daily life is each person because the way for the church is Christ, Redemptor Hominis 13, and each person is Christ according to John Paul II. It is true that every individual human being is, as I said in my encyclical Redemptor Hominis, the way for the church. For Jesus alone is the way. Man is the primary and fundamental way for the church. It is necessary to return constantly to this way. Man becomes in an ever new manner the way. It is Jesus who is the way. Man is the primary route that the church must travel, the way traced out by Christ himself. The way traced out by Christ himself was Christ. I am the way, John 14:6. If the way traced out by Christ himself was man, then man is Christ according to him. The church will be faithful in making man's way her own. Christ is for you the way. Man is the first way. Man is the primary and fundamental way for the church, the way for her daily life. Christ, who is the way. Man becomes the way for the church. John Paul II, Letter to Families, number 1, quote, man is the way of the church. John Paul II, Letter to Families, number 23, quote, may we always be enabled to follow the one who is the way and the truth and the life, John 14:6. In number 1 of his Letter to Families, John Paul II told us that man is the way of the church. In number 23, he asks us to follow the one who is the way. Man and Christ must both be the one who is the way according to John Paul II. Man is the way of the church, man in every part of the world. I pay homage to Christ, to him who is the way for each and all. Many times John Paul II has stated that man is the way for the church, and many times he has stated that Christ is the way. Other times he has stated that both are the way. And sometimes he has told us that man is the way because Christ is the way. This is because to him to say one is to say the other. In the general audience just quoted, John Paul II mentions both the way of Christ and the way of man, the indication clearly being that both statements have an equivalent meaning. St. John the Baptist said, "I am the voice of one crying in the wilderness, make straight the way of the Lord." However, John Paul II said, quote, "that we may be given in our day to make straight the way of the Lord and of man, which is the path of the church." Since man is Jesus Christ according to John Paul II, he cannot make straight the way of Jesus Christ without also making straight the way of man. Note also the final words, "the way of the Lord and of man, which is the path of the church." The way of Jesus Christ and of man is the path of the church, he says, because he holds that both are Christ, and Christ is the way of the church.